places. So thank you.
Yeah.
Next we have Baron.
Thank you so much, Nature, for the service that you provide, for the very free access or the limited barrier access to mental health. It's very important for all of us to have access to mental health services, but specifically for those of us in marginalized communities, whether that be Black, brown, queer, suffering and surviving through a myriad of things. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Farron Kia. I am the creator and founder of Love Thy Belly, is the premier body positive organization in Louisville, Kentucky, with a global e-commerce outreach across all social media platforms. And I have a commitment to the representation of fat and large bodies in multimedia forms, so fashion, film, photography, and any other space in which underrepresented bodies deserve to be. I've been doing that positive work for a little over 10 years now, and my business has been in existence for, we'll be going into year 8 this year. So it's been it's definitely been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of staying in the red, coming to the black, going back to the red. And so my relationship with my business has been a labor of love in a lot of ways. And but we still here today, and we keep going. We keep pushing on. Do you mind if I share a piece with you all that I wrote? I'm a self-published author and a writer, and I've been recently getting back kind of into my poetry bag a little bit. And I love the message. The theme is a love letter, because I actually have a book called Lovely Letters. And you can pre-order the book on my website, which is listed up there, or you can email me. And the piece I want to share with you all is called Forgiveness. I forgive you for the way you wrapped your lies in honey-coated sweetness, for the way you spoke words that were empty, or words without action, the choices you made that were steeped in fallacy, the open wounds that were not made by me, but deepened by your constant betrayal, the senseless words marred with slander. But I forgive you for the tainted memories, for the loss of love, the loss of life, and at times the loss of me. But most of all, I forgive myself, because I didn't know then, but I do know now. And I wanted to share that piece because I think oftentimes when we think about love, we forget how much forgiveness has to be a part of love as well, and how oftentimes we show up for love, but we forget to forgive. And sometimes that means forgiving ourselves and not necessarily the people who have hurt us. But thank you all so much for allowing me to be here today to share my lived experience and my expertise. I do have a master's in teaching, so I am an educator as well, and I'm pursuing currently my master's in school counseling.
Now we're gonna have to step it up each month. We're gonna have to have some poetry, some spoken word. You see what they doing to me, Barry? I knew this was gonna be a good conversation today. I'm so excited to have these two to come with us, and this is what we call sacred conversation. So each month we have a different topic, and of course this Sunday we're gonna be talking about love and relationships. And as we talk through this, I'm glad you talked about forgiveness, because it's about love through healing, love through faith, and also love through growth. Continue to evolve. I think about talking about relationships typically is taboo in the church, right? And this is why I love these
Only in certain
places.
only in certain contexts.
Yes.
We can talk about relationships in the church in a certain way. We'll get to that.
Yes. But because we talk about love, we talk about Jesus' love, and when you look at biblical things, marriage, you see what it means to love our neighbor, to love Christ, but it doesn't really talk a lot about dating. So when you talk about like that forgiveness, it's those things that happen even prior to marriage, that a lot of times we suffer in some churches, not all churches, I don't like the stereotype, those conversations across the pulpit or in studies. And then we have some work to do within the church. 1 in 3 adults are single. 40% now, it's a different scene. 40% of relationships are found online. 30 to 40% of marriages honestly end in divorce. And many people desire love, but few are prepared to sustain it. So that gets to our first question. What does healthy love look like on a day-to-day? Not just spiritually, but really practically. Like what do healthy
I like to stay away from generalized terms like healthy. I understand what you're asking, and I want everybody to recognize I am not saying that we should not be seeking healthy. I am saying that healthy is going to look different for different people, right? And so I don't like to generalize because people will then gravitate or seek some normative standard that might not actually work. But in that regard, there are very few places, and I'm saying very few because even with my seminary degree, I don't know that I could validate this. There are very few places, biblically or theologically, where love is not defined by 3 major components: action, sacrifice, and commitment. Right? So action means you have to do something, right? There has to be effort behind what it is that you're doing when you say that you love. Sacrifice sometimes means setting yourself aside for the other person. And when we talk about forgiveness and when we talk about healthy, we can't sacrifice to our own detriment. And I think particularly in church-based settings, sacrifice is too often equated with detrimental self-sacrifice, right? Because we want to emulate and aspire to be sacrificial like Christ, but we don't have to kill ourselves in the process of doing that, right? Like boundaries is a good thing. Sacrifice should also be mutual, so it shouldn't be one way. So, but there should be some measure of sacrifice where you are willing to set yourself aside for the best interest and the well-being of your partner, right? And then from a commitment standpoint, you got to do it even when you don't want to. Right? Like, I mean, there may be some days where you like, ooh, tomorrow. Okay. But, commitment is when you are willing to do something and make the sacrifice, even when it's hard, even when you don't want to, even when there's something else that you would rather do, even when the thing that you really want to do that's easier isn't the thing that needs to be, right? Healthy love is when there is action, sacrifice, and commitment.
I really love how the last part of the question is how people talk, show up, and treat each other. I think oftentimes we make assumptions that because we're in relation with another person that we know what they want, we know what they need, instead of asking them, what do you want? What do you need? How can I show up for you? Or instead of taking initiative to see the ways that it looks like for you to show up for that person. I think we need to think deeply about what it is like when you're upset and how you interact with another person. Oftentimes we speak out of frustration or we speak out of anger, and when you're doing that with someone that you love, you're causing little tiny scars that you can't necessarily see. But as you do it over and over again, they become larger, they become bigger, they become wider. And we don't spend a lot of time tending to those things. We just kind of brush them over. And so we forget how to talk to each other. We forget how to show up for each other. And then that means that we're not treating each other with love or with respect or with the ideas of action. I love how you said having action, sacrifice, and commitment. You have to do that for yourself as well. But that means sometimes you have to look in deep within you. Well, what is it that you're missing, or what is it that you're not connecting to that's causing you not to be able to show up for this person that you love or the people that you love and not be able to be there for them? What is it that you have to kind of take a step back and ask yourself? And so I love that we talked about what it looks like to do those things and to move in relation with people. For it to be healthy, it would have to be those things. You would have to take action for yourself. You would have to figure out what are some things that you may have to sacrifice for you to show up in the best way that you can. And what are the things that you can commit to without necessarily overworking yourself or overwhelming yourself? Or when you do feel those things, how do you communicate that to someone else?
Yeah, we often skip over the process of repair, right? And so we had a fight, we fell out, something happened, it went left, and then we just sit there for a couple days, and then we come, and I hear this all the time, and y'all gonna understand this when you hear it. We come back, and it's like, you wanna get something to eat? And we skipped the entire process of repair, right? Those cuts are still there. They haven't been tended to. Many times, we're still bleeding, and we just like, all right, well, let's just move forward. And repair has to be a part of the process, always, or it won't be healthy. You just keep making the same mistake over and over and over again.
That's powerful. Both of y'all said, I'm trying not to get off task here, but when you talk about sacrifice, I'm thinking of like Abraham. You said that sacrifice that not detrimental, but like in that instance, like the ram in the bush showed up before it was acid. And that was an example of, Jesus died on the cross, but our sacrifice doesn't have to go to that extent. Right. But even when I look at Abraham, sometimes it's easier to sacrifice someone else because when he was going and he was saying Sarah was his sister instead of his wife, he was trying to sustain himself. Yep. So it was moments where he was willing to sacrifice, and it was moments he was not willing. And it's crazy how that can sometimes show up. And when you talk about expectations or what you need in relationships, I used to run a group called Love Notes. I'm from residential. But one of those things in that group, they was talking about expectations in relationships and friendships. But a lot of times we don't talk about what we want, what we need. We just expect that person to know. Mm-hmm. So therefore that repair, because I'm a strong believer, forgiveness happen at the end, that you have to go through the repair before you are able to forgive. Because like 100%. You said, it will continue to happen, especially if if you don't make voice to what harmed you or what hurt you. But the pre to that is, even in the beginning, are you having conversations of what your expectations is, of what you want or will allow in a relationship? So that's powerful that both of you all hit on that.
I had a clinical supervisor who often said that expectations are premeditated resentments.
That's
because if we're not actually talking about it, we're just assuming and expecting that it's going to happen. And when we realize that the other person actually can't read our minds, then we get mad that they weren't able to read our minds when we didn't actually have the conversation to begin with.
Well, do you know yourself enough to even know what your expectations are?
There it is.
Oftentimes people jump in and out of specifically romantic relationships. They'll jump in and out of those, not giving themselves a chance to recognize, well, what is it that I liked or didn't like in that specific relationship? And then does that inform what I do like or don't like in other relationships as well? Because it can change depending on, the interactions that you're having with that person that you're with.
And I think that kind of segue to the next question. I'm going to skip one and I'm going to go back to it. Sorry, Byron. But what inner work someone should do before entering the dating scene, and why we often skip this part?
Being
so you talked
alone.
about
you have, and people are so afraid to be alone, specifically in the current world we live in, where we have so much access to people through devices of any kind, whether that be phone, computer, laptop, tablet, whatever you're using. You have access to, ideally, billions of people across the globe.
24/7.
Consistently, without, if you're someone who keeps your phone in your hand for work or whatever it is, you are constantly accessing other people. And so people have got to be okay with being alone. And so that means that maybe you're dating casually, where you're not pouring into commitment with this person, or people, but you're just casually dating. So you go out on dates, you hang out, you go out with friends, maybe you go out in friend groups, but being okay with going home by yourself, and being okay with being home by yourself, being okay with not waking up to someone being right there, being okay going to the grocery store alone, going to the movies alone, going out to eat alone, being okay with being by yourself, because that is one of the way, not the only way, but it is one way that you're getting to know yourself outside of your existence being tied to another person. And we skip that because they have a fear of being isolated, they have a fear of missing out, they have a fear of being alone. Especially if maybe you're someone who's never even lived alone. Maybe you went from your family's house to living with your spouse. You've never experienced what it's even like to live by yourself,
Independent.
much less to do things independently, to do things without being with another person. And that can look like a myriad of ways. Maybe you also have kids. And so you went from living with your family to living with your kids to maybe you do have another person, but maybe you don't. And so being alone is the thing that I feel like we oftentimes skip, and not alone as in you're lonely, but alone as in being with
Solitude.
self, loving on self, sitting with self.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm gonna answer this question backward.
Okay.
We skip it, particularly, let's be honest about where we are, right? The cultural ethos from which we are speaking today, Black church context, Black, we know what that is, church, we understand that faith-based influence, and oftentimes being partnered is held in higher esteem than being single.
Yeah.
And so we skip that part because we arbitrarily are trying to achieve something, or we're actually shamed into being connected and partnered in a relationship with someone to achieve an artificial status of some type of spiritual arrival at a point, some level of spiritual maturity by being in relationship with other people. And loneliness is fear activating, right? We'll talk about the difference between being lonely and being alone.
Yeah.
But loneliness is fear activating, and our nervous system seeks relief by any means necessary. And if the standard is that I have to be connected with this person, that I have to be married, we're also talking about church context, which is many times both patriarchal and binary. And so not only do we have to be partnered, but we have to be partnered in a certain way. As a woman, I have to be found. I can't go find someone because then I'm a Jezebel. As a woman, I have to be found, and I have to be found by a man before my virtue, value, worth is even given its credibility when I was a woman because I was born. Right? As a man, you have to find a wife, or it's not good. Yeah? Because as a man, if you find a man, you're an abomination. That's why we skip that part, because we are pressured into achieving an artificial status of spiritual maturity that is based on our cultural ethos. Let's just be real about who we are, right? But the work that I do think is necessary, and I don't necessarily want to limit it to just dating, because I don't define dating as a status of a relationship. I think that dating is a process by which you are getting to know other people. All dating relationships don't have to end in commitment, as Farron said, right? Like, you could just be casually dating. And sometimes that's all you need, right? Like, we can talk about what that is too. But the work that needs to be done before you are committing to a partnered relationship is understanding your patterns and means of attachment. And what that means is, how do you create secure relational bonds with other people? And so what happens to you when the stability of a current relationship or the promise of a future relationship is in jeopardy? Right? Do you pursue it harder? Do you withdraw or walk away? Or do you attempt to control that situation in order to get what it is that you're seeking? Individually, we call that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? In a relationship context, we call that anxious attachment. I'm going to pursue because I need to be seen, I need to be validated, I need to be reassured.
Yeah.
Avoidant attachment.
They did one of those.
I'm going to go so far until that threat is present, and then I'm just going to completely back out.
I've been that.
Completely withdraw, and I'm going to completely walk away and shut down. And then there's disorganized attachment, which oscillates between the two, and that's where that I'm going to try to control this, but I'm only going to try to control it so far because I get scared, but I actually don't want you to leave. I hate you, don't leave me. So understanding how your nervous system is wired to attach to other people, I think is the most important part about entering in any kind of dating, romantic, partner relationship, because when that's triggered within you and you start doing things that the other person is like, who is this person? Or you start doing things that afterwards you're like, what was that? What is going on? When you don't understand how you respond to threat in your relationship, getting to a point where you can be committed will become that much more difficult because it'll just be volatile and it'll be all over the place, always be on a roller coaster.
Well, that you brought up attachment styles. I think people don't, recognize what those are and what that means.
At all.
And how to
Because we're not taught that. Let's just be honest, right? Like,
It's specifically from the context, like you were saying, of the Black church.
exactly.
The idea of relationships is taboo to discuss, but because oftentimes we think about relationships in relation of spousal relationships.
Correct.
And not
That's
in
the only way it's
what-
considered.
And not in like relationship of community.
Right.
What it looks like to be in the community of church, and how that is a relationship built with love, and how
Right.
that is a relationship built with commitment, and how that is a relationship built with action. I talk to my friends about this a lot. We know how to be friends with one another. So then why don't we take that same process of how I show up in my friendship with you to how I show up in my friendship of my romantic, intimate partner relationship? Because if you
We
are
hold
in
them
an
to a higher
intimate
standard, unfortunately, but that too is a warped perspective
yeah,
of what it means to be in a partner relationship, right? And in a church context, we don't ever talk about dating. We go straight from the two people and then you're married, right?
Yeah.
Like what happened in between there?
Yeah.
How did we get to that point that there were two people that had an attraction or a draw and then now they're married? Like there's no discussion about the process of courting and getting to know people and dating and learning what works for you, what works for them, what doesn't work for the two of you.
and learning why that might not end in marriage,
Because it don't have to.
and that's okay.
I like that because kind of like what I mentioned before, like, a lot of times with scripture, especially the Old Testament, it was like arranged marriage. So I think the concept of what we doing now is kind of new.
Yeah.
And then it's continued to evolve with social media and all these different things. And like you said, in the church, it's typically as soon as you start dating somebody, like when y'all get married, when you still in, that commitment thing. So it make it very difficult to kind of navigate those areas out of space, and not a lot of opportunities to do this, have a real conversation and talk about attachment.
Yeah, love-based marriages are only about 150 years. The history of marriage has always been about power and control. We are joining two people, two empires, two things together for the purpose of achieving power and control. Love-based marriages are not something that came around until, I want to say, the 1800s as a popular way of, people partnering. There's a book called Marriage, A History, written by, I believe that lady's first name is Margaret, but her last name is Coontz, Coontz. And it literally goes through the history of how marriages evolved from legal contracts to love-based. And the standard now is love-based, but societally we never actually deconstructed this notion of the legal contract and then built up this idea that love-based should be the standard.
Yeah, because I do believe like it's technically supposed to be love based, but it's still parents trying to coordinate their children marriage. Like you need to marry this type of person or whatever. You need this type of finance because it is a contract. In a lot of scenarios that we still, as society, has set this stage for this. But going back to the question of, because we've been talking about it, but when do you know you're ready? Like, is it after you?
Never.
Is it after the therapy and figuring out your attachment stuff? Like, how do you know when you are ready? Are you just tired of being alone? Because both of you all talked about loneliness, but how do you know when
you're
it's
ready
time
to
for
be
you?
married?
Date.
Oh,
No.
ready to date.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that.
No.
You're always ready.
Oh, yes.
Because we put too much emphasis and weight in the notion of dating.
Yeah.
Dating is a period where you are getting to know people to determine whether or not there's a possibility of future connection. Right? Like we go into dating with this idea that because I'm dating, that there's some pressure or expectation set on this specific dating engagement process. I'm dating this one person, so now there's all of this pressure around what's going to happen because I'm dating this one person, as opposed to giving it an opportunity to be, it's a period of getting to know people, right? Like, how am I going to get to a point of the choosing to marry if I don't even know you?
We talking about marriage, and I don't even know your middle name yet.
How about that? Right? Where you from? Where your mama from? Where your
What is
people
the
from?
relationship that you have with your parents?
How about that?
Yeah.
What was your childhood like growing up?
Yeah.
What are your siblings like? How did you treat your siblings? How did you treat other people? How did you treat people in school? You know, like there's real questions that we don't ask before we say, oh, let's just hop into marriage. Can you rephrase the question for me again, though?
What? Let's see. Yeah, how you know you're ready?
Thank you so much.
I'm like, what's on the screen? Is it the same? I couldn't tell.
You know that you're ready to date. Now, I think we should also make it clear. When we're saying dating, we are meaning job interviews.
How about
We're
that?
meaning applying for a job. Think about that. How many, do you only apply for one job and you never apply for another job again if you never got the interview, if you never got the call back? Now you just done applying for jobs?
No.
You apply for a job, you find out whether or not you've gotten the interview.
And you
find out
apply
whether or
for
not
more than one job at the same time. That's
Now,
okay.
And I was getting there. You don't.
It's okay.
Sometimes you apply for jobs at the job you currently have. Okay, hello, let's talk about it.
I mean,
But
listen,
we're saying
it happens.
contextually, we're saying dating, as in you've met someone and now you all have communicated in some form of way and you've decided to continue to communicate, or you've decided to now go on an actual date, or you've decided to enter into the courting process, or you've decided you're communicating though, first and foremost. So you know you're ready to date when you're ready to talk to somebody outside of yourself.
Right.
You know you're ready to date when you're ready to have a conversation in which someone may disagree with what you're saying, and you're okay to listen to that disagreement and not take that as someone attacking you.
Yeah.
You know you're ready to date when you're okay with someone saying no to something. You're ready to date when you're okay telling someone else no to something. Right? We're talking about dating, not necessarily entering into a relationship, not necessarily entering into that contract later on. You're not saying yes to the job yet.
Right.
You're on the part where you're asking your questions now. Is this a place that's safe for you? Is this a place that's going to bring you happiness? Is this a place that's going to be consistent? Is this a place that's going to measure into the ways in which you see life going for yourself? And if you're not ready to even ask those questions of yourself, and then you're not ready to ask those questions of someone else.
I think it's an important thing to talk about loneliness, because that was the part of the end portion of the question is, how do you know when you're ready to date versus just lonely or tired of being alone? All right. And loneliness is a natural human experience.
Yeah.
Right. It is natural for human beings to experience loneliness at some point in life for some long, short, indiscriminate period of time. scripturally, it even says that it is not meant for man to be alone. We are communal creatures.
Yeah.
Human beings are not designed to live in isolation, to be alone. And many times loneliness is what we are trying to push down and trying to satiate and trying to quell, which is why we seek connection with other people. And if we are seeking connection with others in order to fulfill some emptiness or to relieve some distress about being alone, then that's probably not going to end up being a healthy connection. Probably going to end up being something where you repeat old patterns of injury because you're not actually coming into it with a sound mind, ready to actually ask the questions, as Farron said, and to be ready to receive rejection, to set your own boundaries, to do some of these other things, because we are seeking connection to fill a void, as opposed to seeking connection to expand what's already, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to use it because it is what it is, whole. Right? Like, if we are not seeking connection from a place of, I'm good where I am, I want to do this to explore something beyond me, as opposed to, I'm not good where I am, I need to do this to fulfill something that I don't have. Right? That's the difference between seeking connection from a place of loneliness versus seeking connection from a place of readiness.
I think people talk about like looking for my other half. And when we're saying that, we're not saying like you're half of a person yourself. We're saying you're looking for that complement to you.
Yes.
So if you have these things going on over here, and this person has these things going on this side, well, when you all come together, you're going to have more. You're going to have an overflow. You're going to have an abundance. Like what you were saying, you're not operating from a space of necessity. You're not operating from a deficit.
Yeah.
You already have enough. You already have plenty because you did that inner work to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that because I was a little nervous. I mean, I'm with the dating and like I used the job analogy, but I think like the most important part of that is that communication. Don't have somebody thinking the one
just
thing
be
and it's another.
honest.
Yes.
I am married to a man who I love very dearly. I love him all the time. I like him most of the time. I am married to a man that I met in college. And when I met him, I was dating somebody else.
Yeah.
And then I dated both of them at the same time. And they both knew.
Yeah.
Come on, transparency.
We're dating. Like, I'm not committed to you. You don't own me.
Yeah.
Right?
And when you marry, you don't own me.
Well, I mean, that's a different conversation.
You're right.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Let me pull back.
I'm not disagreeing with you. There's a couple of different rules there, but but also, what are the rules? We have to define them, and then we abide by them.
What are the boundaries?
How about that? I like to use the word rules. What in any regard? Dating, we put too much on dating.
It should be fun. I don't know why people are saying the dating pool is trash. I don't know about the relationship pool.
I wouldn't know.
When we're talking about just getting to know a person, it's okay if you all didn't connect.
1,000%.
It's okay if the chemistry wasn't there. Guess
Most of
what?
those connections won't
means
end
you
in.
don't have to date them anymore.
How about that?
You don't have to talk to them anymore. It wasn't there for you, or maybe it felt more like a friendship. That's okay too.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay to just be in community with each other. I love how you pointed out that it is a natural human response for connection.
Absolutely.
We have always traveled in a pack or traveled in a school or a herd or whatever the phrase is you want to. Community is something that is very natural for humans to connect to want, and to desire. I think that we struggle when we equate that connection to meaning marriage, or we equate that connection to meaning this is my forever person, or when we don't allow those connections to be organic, and we don't allow those connections to no longer exist. Mm-hmm. We have that fear of missing out on something because we're not accepting that this was not the connection that I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And it's
And somehow
okay
that equals failure.
Ooh, that's another.
Yeah, and somehow because the connection
We
didn't
gonna- we
work
need to
out,
put that down.
that equals failure. The guy that I was dating, when I was dating the man that I'm married to now, I sang in his wedding.
I know that's right.
We're friends.
Because whatever was happening before, it was
Right.
it was
Whatever
a
was happening
friendship that you were
before,
building.
it didn't. It's no longer happening. We're still friends.
Yeah.
Now there is a guy that I used to date that I had to block because whatever. There's also that. Not all connections.
Boundaries.
But I think that comes with disappointment, right? I think when I say disappointment, I think that fear of disappointing others, because I'm from Detroit, especially us grew up in a black household. We was taught, to not really a lot of times to speak our mind.
At
if
all.
we didn't like something, you better not say you don't like it while we in public.
Not only do you not have feelings, but the feelings that you have aren't the ones you should.
Yeah. And so now that we are adults, I think it's easy. It sounds easy to say, like, I don't want this. I want to disattach from this relationship. But a lot of times we are groomed to believe to put other people's feelings before ours. You don't have the space to say how you really feel. Like, I'm not happy in this, because then you become the villain. Some people should be able to be happy and take the feedback of, like you said, we still could be friends, but as far as relationship, this just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, like I said, we just grown to, it's hard for us to have those real conversations and people accept that.
I
it's
think
what
we
it is.
also inaccurately equate chemistry with compatibility. And that just because I have a spark with this person from a chemistry perspective, that somehow means that we should be in relationship with one another and be compatible. There's a man, yep, I'm not going to tell all my business. There's a man with whom I share great chemistry. Politically, professionally, I mean, even just personally, personal interests, we would never be a good couple, ever. But we have great chemistry. And we misappropriately equate chemistry with compatibility, and then we're trying to make these toxic relationships work because it's good in one area, the bedroom, but it's horrible everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? And societally, we're taught that. Like, it's reinforced. And I like to use the word taught because whether it was explicit or implicit, where I just observed and internalized this thing, we were still taught. Right? And a lot of people have difficulty with that notion. I ask my clients all the time when they tell me something, and I'm like, yeah, I know that is a schema by which you have been operating for your entire life, and you don't even know where you picked that up. And they say something to me, and I say, where did you learn that? And they look at me like, I didn't learn that. Sure you did. Right? That implicit learning, where we have observed something with only what we can see at face value and not really understood the context, and then we internalized it, that's the stuff that's hard to get over. That's the stuff that's hard to deconstruct. That's the stuff that's hard to walk away from. And one of the things that we have implicitly been taught in movies, in television, in books, in relationships that we see in our everyday life is that chemistry equals compatibility, and you're supposed to stick to it and work it out.
And act on it.
Well, yeah, there's that.
Because sometimes just because
Right.
things were going a certain way, well, now we got to act on it. Well, not necessarily.
No, we really don't.
We might need to take a step back and have more conversation.
About
Also, to the point of when you're ready to date. In the black community, we're not really taught dating.
at all.
Yeah, no.
You know, and a lot of people joke about it, right? Like, well, my baby can't date till they're 35. Well,
Right.
Sweetheart, if your baby doesn't experience dating until they're 35, they're just missing out on a lot of different development that they can have for themselves.
Developmental milestone.
They're missing out on ways in which to learn about themselves. Because oftentimes you learn a lot about yourself when being in connection with
other
others.
people.
Because if you're just talking to yourself, if you're just dealing with yourself all the time without having, and when I say relation with others, I mean in community with others. So people you work with, you go to church with, having conversations with people outside of you allows you to learn you. Yeah. And so when we're not allowing our youth to experience what dating is like while teaching them about boundaries or rules, teaching them about expectations, teaching teaching them about what being in community, what being in connection with other people looks like, then all they have is what they've seen.
Exactly.
And so if they grew up in
And
a
when you don't
household-
actually talk about what it is that they've seen, because they had a grown folks business, now we have to interpret
Come on.
whatever it is that we've seen with very little information.
Come on. So I grew up in a household, and I've talked to my mom about this before, where I saw a lot of emotional outbursts. I saw a lot of, not a lot of physical violence, but a lot of emotional violence, a lot of harm with words. And so when I entered into the dating life myself, well, for me, my measure of things was, well, as long as they're not hitting me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see that.
I hear
So
that
as
often.
long as this isn't happening, then
It's
that means
okay.
it's good, right?
Right.
And it's because we're not having those conversations of saying to our youth, this is what it looks like to be in connection with other people that is loving, that is respectful, that is thoughtful, that is mindful. We're not taught those things. And so we don't have, like you said, those explicit conversations.
Yep.
Taking it back to me being a teacher, I have to model for my students what I want them to do. If I put this standard on the board and say, this is what you're gonna do, and I don't show them how to do it, I'm gonna get a bunch of different ways to do it. And some of them might be the way that makes sense. Some of them might have met that standard. But a lot of them are gonna just do things based off of what they understood.
Right.
But if I show them something, they can produce something that goes with that standard that I want them to learn. It may not be they may not do the exact thing that I modeled, but they're going to do something that made sense to the standard. So if we are teaching our youth that what a loving relationship looks like is when we're in church and someone comes and gives the person next to them a tissue because they see that they're crying. Oh, well, that's being thoughtful, being mindful of another person's experience. That's being considerate of someone outside of yourself.
Yeah.
If we have those explicit conversations of what it looks like, then young people don't end up in these situations where they oftentimes experience harm because they don't know anything better.
You know, I think like a lot of that, because you said not allowed to date. I think that's, I think what we would consider within the black community is the women that I don't want my daughter dating. I don't want them dating this type of men. But the boys, it's okay for them to have relationships. They not taught how to have relationships, as you said, how to care, but it's okay for them to have it. But for the girls or the women, I want to protect you from this. And then if
And what exactly is it that we're protecting them from? Because in that regard, we have equated dating with sex.
Yes.
And if we add on the identity of being queer on top of that,
How about that?
well, okay. Well, I definitely don't want you dating because I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
And so now you've not only, stamped out a part of their identity, you've also stamped out an experience that they could have had where they're learning through that experience, where you're supporting them in that experience. No, it doesn't look exactly like maybe what you assumed, or it doesn't look like exactly like the one that you did, but but they still do need to be taught through it. And some of it might be you are having to learn some things as well as the family involved in the queer individual's life.
Yeah.
Gonna change the subject a little bit, because we know past relationships, trauma, all this can show up in dating, even in marriage. But how do we know when something, even though I don't really care for this word, it's a trigger versus being discernment in something? Like, how do we know the difference? Like, this is something that we should end it, or just some unhealed something in me that's causing me to be uncomfortable?
Let's clarify, because I think terminology is important in that we have to, words matter. Words matter, and they have meaning.
Real meaning.
Yes.
Not pop culture meaning.
And unfortunately, sometimes we're not actually speaking from the same meaning. That is one of the tenets of Gottman's couples therapy, which is probably, I won't say the leading, it's probably second in any regard. It's a very popular evidence-based couples therapy approach that you have to develop shared meaning.
Yeah.
right? Um, there's a couple that they do social media videos, and the husband gets on and he's like, my wife says I have trust issues. And she said, you do have trust issues. And he's like, what do you mean? Every 300 times a year, I put my prized possession in your mouth full of teeth. How is that not trust? I'm gonna let y'all think about that. I'm gonna let that land for a second. She wasn't talking about that kind of trust. They were using the same word, but they were not talking about the same thing. Mm-hmm. All right? Shared meaning is important. So let's get on the same page when we talk about triggers. Trigger is an event or action that elicits emotional reactivity or a stress response. At its core.
Not just something that annoys you.
Exactly.
Emotional reactivity or a stress response, right? To that end, when we are comparing the notion of being triggered versus holding something in discernment, a trigger is going to activate, right? Emotional reactivity, a stress response. You will be heightened. Discernment is, and they're both coming from a place of protection, right? A trigger is a protective response that is based in fear, and I like to use the word terror because I think that is a more clear definition of the fear that we're talking about when we're talking about being emotionally reactive. Trigger is a protective action based in fear. Discernment is a protective action based in wisdom, right? And so when we are coming from a place of wisdom-based insight, that should settle you. It's not going to activate you if you are coming from a place of wisdom, right? And so the way that I would like to say it is the difference is, are you heightened or are you settled? If you're heightened, then it's probably a trigger that has elevated your emotional reactivity or put you back in a place of some type of prior stress that is still stored in your body. Trauma is the brain's way of storing a stressful experience in our bodies, most times disconnected from the actual event where that happened. Right? I'm going to say that again. Trauma is our brain's way of storing an emotional, stressful experience in our body, disconnected from the story narrative of the event where it occurred. For instance, my husband, I'm going to tell two stories. When we were first married and we would sit down to dinner, my husband would always lift his food and look at the bottom of it before he ate. And that used to drive me nuts because I'm like, what are you trying to say? You saying that I can't cook? You don't like my food? What is the problem? What are you doing? He didn't even realize that he was doing that, right? He was, I don't know what are you talking about? And so we would literally be in arguments about hamburgers or pork chops or, you know what I mean? Like something silly. We went to visit his mom, and she was making breakfast or whatever, and I came into the kitchen, and she was making pancakes, and she was like, oops, burnt that one, gotta flip it over. And I was like, that's why he does that. He does that because you would burn the food and then flip it over so he wouldn't know that it was burnt. He didn't even realize he was doing it.
Yeah.
It was stored in him so deeply, disconnected from the idea that this is what my mother did. And so now everywhere else I go and everything else I do, I have to be concerned about what's going on with my food because my mama used to burn it and flip it over.
Yeah.
Right? On the flip side of that, I grew up in a black household where my father firmly believed in corporal punishment. And while that might not be what I would promote today, it was what it was. I grew up in the 80s. No big deal. Okay. I would always, when my husband would get undressed at night and he would take off his belt, and one day he asked, what is wrong with you? Do you think I'm going to hit you? Why are you doing that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't even realize that I was doing it. And that in that moment, the man that I had committed my life to, that I shared a home and a bed with, that we had built a family and a life, was just getting undressed at the end of the day. right? Just getting undressed at the end of the day, him taking off his belt activated something within me. That's a trigger. But it's also disconnected from the original story, right? And so triggers are going to hype you. They're going to activate you. They're going to send your spidey senses in overdrive mode to figure out, like, what's going on, protect me, something has to happen here. Discernment is going to settle you. It's going to be from a place of wisdom.
Thank you.
I like how you put that. I want to be clear on what we do oftentimes with social media and with pop culture is we have pop culture psychology, pop culture therapy, in which someone learned a word with their therapist, or they learned a word from
Don't get me
reading
started.
watching a podcast or reading something from someone who may not have the knowledge and the research-based information
Or the
evidence-based
credentials.
information to speak about these things. So I'm glad that you did explain what a trigger actually is and
Yes,
how
I don't
it
like the word.
elicits an actual emotional response from people. You can think about triggers in different ways. Like, what else do you see the word trigger in association with? So you can think about it from that place too, right? Like usually, like a gun, trigger on a gun, things like that.
Right.
Or
But
that
it activates.
triggered something. So like I'm thinking about like a mechanism triggering something, right? So you can think about it from those kind of standpoints. So I do want to be clear that when you're talking to someone, you're saying, "Oh, that triggered me." Well, you might be trying to explain to them how they did something and you didn't like it.
Correct.
That they did something and it annoyed you.
It upset
or
you.
you did something and it made you feel upset, or it made you feel overwhelmed. So that's where we want to make sure that when we're using that term or we're using that word, that it's coming from a place of where we are knowledgeable about what the word itself actually means. And maybe if we are learning to communicate, maybe we have to say more words. And so it might look like saying to that person, that thing that you did made me feel. And that way they'll understand what it is that you did, that they did, and what the response was from you. And that way you're giving that person a chance to decide to do that thing again or to not do that thing again. If they choose to do that thing again, now you have to make a decision for
That's right.
yourself. And that's where discernment comes in. So they've done something, I let someone know my rule, or I let someone know my boundary, right? Boundary meaning something that is not a wall. Boundaries are things that can change and they can alter based off of your lived experiences. So that we'll talk about that later. So that's where that discernment comes in of, okay, now I'm deciding what this person has done something that I explicitly said I don't like, or that it does this for me. And now I have to choose with the wisdom that I now have of where I'm going to go and move forward with this. So the trigger, thinking about what triggers are, that's you learning how to communicate your experiences, your lived experiences, learning how to communicate your reaction, response to a thing, and then the discernment comes in and, well, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do about it?
Thinking with my history in behavioral health, that trigger word does, it triggers me now. But with that, because I know from personal experience that things that are not connected in the current does show up. And a lot of times people take that personal. Like, I know you are not this individual. I know you may not be up abusive. You may not, because you take a belt off. Like, I know you are not that person who I connected to. But a lot of times that other person was like, but I'm not that. Why would you feel like I would do that? So when you talking about like those things, I know you said tell them like this is how it make you feel and kind of connecting more to that. But what if the other person may not be receptive? I still feel like, why you connected me to this person? I'm not that. I'm not your ex. I'm not your parents or whoever that trauma may be connected to.
Tell them to call me.
I know that's right. well, now we have to have a conversation as to why are you centering yourself in the experience that I'm having and that I'm communicating. You've made this now about you when we were actually talking about how you did a thing and it made me feel something. We're not, if you're centering yourself in this, you're not listening to me.
Yeah.
So that's where that discernment comes in.
And that may not be intentional, that they aren't able to hear what's being said. And that, might come from their experience, right, of not being heard. But that goes back to what I said at the beginning. If we are talking about a healthy attachment, love relationship, we have to be able to sacrifice something
Ego.
at some times. Yeah, like we have to be able to set aside our very valid feelings, right? Because my husband was like, why are you acting like that? You think I'm about to beat you? And I understand why he felt that way, right? But we can't have that conversation. We can't have the conversation where I'm telling you what the thing that you did was experienced by in my reality, right? I tell people all the time, nobody can make you feel anything. They do something that then elicits a feeling in you. You can't have the conversation of, here's my experience of the thing that you did, but I'm frustrated that you've misinterpreted my actions at the same time. Those two conversations cannot be in the same space at the same time. We have to be able to sacrifice something in that moment in order to hear one person, come to a resting point on that, and then address the other person's grievance. Right? And that's hard. That is difficult. We are not taught to communicate in that way. Yeah. We are not taught to listen that way. We are not taught to resolve those kinds of relational disputes.
Conflict resolution skills
at all. Well, that's not true. We are taught conflict resolution skills. They're not always the best choices. Because we just go duke it out and then go get something to eat.
So those who are married, I could talk to y'all all day. We're getting close to the end. I'm like, oh man, we didn't even get to all the questions. But for those who are married or in long-term relationships, how do they keep their love intentional, even when life be life? And I'm gonna put it like that, with life stress and everything that be happening. How can they keep the love intentional? What kind of advice would you give to those?
Keep living. Challenges, difficulty, conflict, and life doing what it does is inevitable. It's going to happen. It is unavoidable. So the first thing is, don't pretend as if it's not coming. Right? The only sure thing in life is that things will change. They will not always stay the same. If you get to a point where things are more than what you can handle with the skills that you have been taught and that you already have, seek trusted, credentialed professional advice. And that's not a shameless plug. That is a therapist who has been in couples therapy when I thought my marriage was going to end. That's a therapist who has been in couples therapy who was becoming a therapist when I was like, I don't know if I really want to be with this dude right now. Right? Challenges are inevitable, particularly when couples are at the living life, doing well in your careers or on your jobs, raising children, particularly if those children are completely dependent on you, right? Like my husband and I, we empty nesters. We do what we want. We travel the country to go see the kids because they're at an age and stage in their lives where they're not completely dependent on us anymore. Right? My youngest is a freshman in college now. So we got through the tough years because the tough years are coming. It's unless you have unlimited resources, unlimited support, unlimited community, those tough years are coming. It is inevitable. Be realistic about the fact that they're coming. Be honest about your ability to deal with what it's coming. Find the kind of support that you need in order to get through those stressful moments, right? Whether that is your own community that is built in, whether that's your family, whether you need to get some type of assistance, be that public assistance, be that community-based assistance, whatever it is that you need, be honest about it, and then find trustworthy, credentialed support to help you through it.
You have anything? No, I think. One last question for you, just because there's spiritual background. What are some red flags people spiritually justify but shouldn't?
I'm this one's on my phone, so I'm gonna just go ahead and.
I do got a piece for this though.
You got
No,
some? Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
So primarily, and this is the challenge that I think a lot of people have, because again, our cultural ethos is Black church context. Yes. Generally, these red flags that people justify spiritually come from people who only ever have biblical, scriptural, or theological responses to human experiences. Right? And I want to be clear. I am not dismissing the notion that there are very valid and contextual biblical and theological responses to some of the things that we face. But if you only ever have some kind of scripture that you are throwing at people when they are coming to you with their human challenges, that's a red flag, and we like to justify it because they're giving us scripture. Right? And so we don't want to dismiss and debate scripture, because then that makes us bad Christians. But if they never have anything other than some type of spiritual bypassing scripture to throw at you, then we justify that, and that's a red flag. Justifying disrespect as strong leadership. Justifying jealousy and over monitoring as protection. Justifying emotional intensity and quick emotional intensity as discernment and confirmation from God. Justifying boundaries violations as transparency. You don't have to have the key access to open my phone. And if you're telling me that we shouldn't have anything to hide from each other and we can just have open and free access, and I'm telling you that feels like a violation of my boundaries, and that's not something that justifying the refusal of accountability with spiritual authority. Touch not thy anointed. Right? So, yes, there is always a place to apply biblical context. The Bible was translated, I don't remember the exact number, but it's somewhere short of 10 languages before it got to English. And so oftentimes what we are reading is not necessarily the actual specific interpretation that was meant when it was written. It also is not in our time and context. And so while the message is contextual and the message is applicable, we can't just flat lay it over what's happening specifically in our world, right? We have to understand the intent underneath it and then apply that to our context. And if all we ever do is just throw scripture and beat people over the head with the Bible, that feels like power and control to me. And the essence of abuse is power and control.
Baron, you said you had something to add.
Absolutely. I think oftentimes we use scripture to justify wrongdoings, or to say things like, well, you took this covenant of marriage to be forever. You said for better, for worse, for richer, for poor.
God hates divorce.
I never said, if you harm me, I'll stay.
How about that?
I never said, if you lie to me, I'll stay. I never said, if you choose to manipulate me, if you choose to cheat, if you choose to disrespect. That's not what we said. For better, for worse does not mean to the detriment of who you are as a person. It means that we going through some things as a collective, whether that be in connection with each other, family. We are going through something. The team is struggling, not because we intentionally harmed one another, Maybe we have unintentionally harmed one another. That's different, right? Maybe in you were upset and you raised your voice at me, but that's not something you normally do.
Yeah.
That was something that happened. That was not a pattern of your behavior. For rich or for poor, we've gone through some things. Something happened. You know, we never know what happens in life. Things happen in life. We just saw it. But I don't know the percentage of the percentage of black women who lost their jobs under this current administration. People did not expect that. They had built these lifestyles knowing that they had this money, that they had this, you know, they built these lifestyles, and now that gets taken out from underneath them. That was the for better, for worse, for richer, for poor. If things are happening in life and I can't show up for you, or I can't show up in this connection how I normally did, can you be there for me? But people use these vows within marriage. They use other aspects of the Bible to say that or scripture to say that it's okay if I do this because it was written like this. Yeah, we're also talking about, I love that you pointed out that this is the language that we understand it to be and is translated several times before, but also we're thinking about the context of what was happening at the time that it was written.
Time.
Men had positions of power that they were abusing at that time. Yeah. Empires were being built and torn down daily at that point, where we're talking about things that were being experienced, that was a human experience when we didn't have the things we have now.
Right.
We didn't have the tools we have now. We didn't have the resources we have now. And our oppositions and problems that we have now and obstacles are not the exact same that they were then. And so we have to cognitively think about, we're also using outdated research to justify current events.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't really get a chance to get to this question, but I do want to make sure that I cover this when we say this. There was a question about patience and faith versus God trying to remove us from something. And patience and faith is endurance in suffering that cannot be immediately changed. In other words, there is nothing that any person can do to make it better. Right? And when we're talking about these spiritual justifications and red flags, we can absolutely change that. We can absolutely make that better. We can absolutely have conversation. We can absolutely sit down and have debate. We can have debate and walk away disagreeing about what it is that we believe is the thing that should do. But if it cannot actually be changed, that's a different conversation than something that we're doing, that we are enduring, but it can be that somebody can actually do something about that, right? If people are speaking disrespectfully to you, they can change the way they speak to you, or you can remove yourself from that situation. If there's an element of power and control in the relationship that you have, that can be changed or ended, right? And so the difference between patience and faith is the question of, is there anything that can actually be done about this?
Yeah. Yes. Half for sure. Step. Oh my. So his question, I'm going to kind of combat him a little bit. How can someone heal and build without just building walls that block even, I know you don't like the word healthy love or love, like someone who's really intentional, really trying to love someone, but because of past things, you know, sometimes we unconsciously sometimes build walls. And the second part of that is, as we close out, is any advice that you would like to give to someone who is dating, who is married, or is any kind of advice you want to leave them with? So two-part to that.
How can someone
Go ahead.
How can someone heal? I'm going to go back to what I said before. You have to sit with yourself. So, and when I say sit with yourself, I don't mean that you're only listening to yourself. I mean, you're reading, you're going to therapy, you're seeking resources. But if there's, you mentioned earlier, you have a lot of free therapy resources. There are other free and barrier removed access to therapeutic resources that can help you. So talking to yourself, asking yourself questions, saying those things out loud to like how you said it, trusted professional. Because there's oftentimes things that you don't have the answers to, and that's okay. Being okay with not having the answers. So sitting with yourself to give yourself time to heal, to give yourself time to build what may have been broken, whether that have been your ideas of self-worth or your ideas of self-confidence or your ideas of self-esteem, remembering that those things come from self, but that you can learn how to get them back, or you can learn how to build them again, or if you never had them before, how to build them completely. And so then giving yourself time to heal specifically. And people probably know that quote, time heals all wounds. And I wouldn't necessarily say that, but but giving yourself time to heal. And that can look different depending on what things that you have going on, to what different factors may be involved. Maybe you need more than therapeutic resources. Maybe you need more. And so figuring out what it is that you need on your healing journey, knowing that it's not going to look like anybody else's around you, because nobody else is you. So finding those things that fit you, fit your path of life, fit the trajectory of life that you would like to see yourself in. So that's what that healing looks like. And then the other part was for those who are wanting love but feel overlooked or tired or close to giving up. My real piece of advice, and when I say real piece of advice, I mean this is just the realest Ross that it can be. Buy my book on self-love.
Listen, and it's not even shameless. It's just a plug.
It was real. Buy my book, Lovely Letters. But the real piece of advice is to be okay with who you are. In this current state that you are, accept whoever that is. And be okay with saying, I need these things to be whole, or I need these things to be more, or I need these things to be better. And I appreciate that you said reaching out to community resources too, mutual aid. You have to decide what it is that you need for yourself. Mm-hmm. And you have to be okay with saying, and it's hard, right, to look at ourselves and say, we haven't done this, or we need more of this, or asking for help is hard. So it is really looking at yourself, sitting with yourself, and being okay with saying, I do need help, or I do need resources. And now I need to figure out what that help looks like. I need to figure out what those resources are. And I need to be okay reaching out, finding those people, finding your community. If you are in a church community currently and you are not able to ask the people in your church community for help, that's not community. Mm-hmm.
How can someone heal and build self-worth without building walls that block healthy love? Number one, you got to figure out what hurt you and then work toward healing it, right? Because if you're trying to heal the wrong thing, we won't actually ever get there. I'm glad that you brought up the notion that time heals all wounds, because that's not accurate. You break your leg and you never actually get it reset in a cast. Your bone will grow back together, but it won't heal well.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, time helps, but you also need to treat it. And you got to figure out what it is that you're treating, and then get the kind of help and support, credible, trustworthy support. Right? And the advice that I have, if you're still looking for love, if you're close to giving up, I want you to be completely honest with yourself. Are you actually looking for long-term committed relationship, or are you just looking for connection? Do you just need to be in community with other people? Or do you really need to be in one singular long-term committed relationship? And I can't tell you what the answer to that question is. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other, or that one is right or wrong. But that's the question you have to answer, so that, again, you are working toward addressing the right thing. Because if we're not addressing the thing that's actually in need, if we're not addressing the sore spot that's actually hurting, we're going to keep repeating patterns of injury and failure and unsuccess and difficulty and stress. So be completely honest with yourself about the kind of connection it is that you're seeking.
Thank you both. This has been good conversation. I think we're gonna need a part two, but this has been great. I'm a person like we closing. It's the end. We didn't get to Q&A. I don't know if there's anything in the chat, but I want you all. I know you did your plug again. But as we close out, this is the last thing. I want people to be able to get in contact with you so they can't say, I don't know how to get with them. They shared their contact information. It'll be 3 times at this point. But I want you all to do it again as we close out. Tell them how to get in touch with you. And because people may have questions after this live as they watch the YouTube. Just want to make sure it's out there for everyone.
So you can find me on the internet anywhere, Anitra Durand Allen. You can find me at bestlifelouisville.com. That is my practice. You can find me on Psychology Today. That is my profile. You can find me on social media anywhere at Anitra Durand Allen, Anitra Durand Allen. And in any of those places, there will be opportunities to contact me, to reach out to me, to email me. I'd love to hear from you.
Hi, everybody. Once again, my name is Farron Kia. You can find me across all social media platforms at Love Thy Belly, LOVETHYBELLY. You can also contact me on my business page, same thing, Love Thy Belly, and through email, lovethybelly1@gmail.com. As a body confidence and self-love coach, we will do a lot of heart work on finding out what it is that you want, what it is that you need, and if you're seeking connection to others, or if you first need to be seeking connection to self.
Thank you both. I cannot thank you enough for accepting the opportunity, showing up today in this space. As we close out, as we always say, this week set something on fire. We love you. We can't wait to see you all next Sunday. Be blessed.